Hello and welcome to the Madecast, the official podcast of the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, a series of lectures on video game history as part of the Made's ongoing effort to preserve history through teaching and displaying playable exhibits of rare games and consoles.
While life in the time of COVID has forced us to close our doors, the support of people like you has allowed us to continue to bring history to you through lectures and interviews like the one you'll hear in a few minutes. I'm Chun.
I'm Red.
And I'm Miles. On this last episode before the new year, we're talking about the Game Awards. All the awards, announcements, reveals, and news that came from gaming's biggest event. So
this is exciting.
It was a big 3+ hour, I think plus the pre-show, it was over 3 hours long.
Yeah.
We're not going to have time to get through everything, and we don't need to because, you know, the list is online, and frankly, do your own research.
We're just reading all this stuff.
Yeah, you can read. You don't need us to tell you.
But we obviously have to talk about Game of the Year.
Yes.
So, It Takes Two from Hazelight Studios was picked for this year's Game of the Year. I've seen it played. I haven't played through it with a friend, but I've seen two friends play it, and I hung out with them while they did it. I think it deserves it.
I also think so. Just from... I haven't had that close of an experience, but I've watched a lot of like playthroughs of it and people online, and it is so whimsical, and the fact that they can change gameplay styles so easily is really something that's really beautiful. I also love the way they introduce co-op is so refreshing. Compared to like essentially just trying to accomplish the same goal over and over with a lot of other co-ops. It's a really fun game.
It is a fun game. I have been watching a lot of people play it, but the only problem for myself to play it's pretty difficult to find another one who haven't played it and willing to do it together with you.
Yeah, I mean at this point potentially but it's that's another thing I have because it also won Best Co-op Game, or Best Multiplayer Game, rather. I think that specific category it's very broad and like not as defined as other ones, but it's that's why I'm also like just in like kind of curious about it taking both of those. But I think it's really worth checking out. The story is also just a really nice tale about marital strife, but
the story is very sweet. I liked it.
Yeah,
I think after Hazelight Studios' previous game, A Way Out, which is sort of following the same model of like forced 2-player split screen co-op, It Takes Two is much more their speed.
Yes.
A Way Out was very sort of restrictive in its story, didn't quite match like the way it was played by two people.
Yeah.
And I think It Takes Two does a much better job of marrying, pun intended, the gameplay with the co-op aspect and the story, and the whole thing worked together a lot better and was much more...
I mean, it's a fantastic game. I don't know. I'm also so for kind of like a serious subject to bring to a lot of like younger audiences too that are potentially playing this game. It's like a heavy hitting story that talks about like family relationships and everything, and the relationship of time spent together. It's a beautiful metaphor for cooperation, literally, with like timing and speaking out loud with the person next to you too. There's a lot of things that are like timing based, and you really have to, it helps to actually coordinate out loud with the person that you're playing with, which in a lot of different ways than like team based like first person shooters would be, or like other team based like like MMOs or
it's definitely
like, arena-based games.
It's definitely a story that is much closer to our life compared to other stories like You Are Saving the World or other stuff. So I think that's why there'll be more people feeling something for the story, because it could get to some personal levels on some point, just because some of those stuff could be happening in our lives too.
Yeah. And congratulations.
Speaking of family, best narrative went to Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes, the highly dysfunctional chosen family of one spacefaring human is another really well done narrative as well. Whereas like the story, I think like the story in It Takes Two can be a little like flat and kind of like straightforward at times. The choices that you make in Guardians of the Galaxy actually affect who joins you on future missions, or at least that's how it felt. I think it's a really it's a really well designed narrative story and allowing you to develop how you fight. Because like it's kind of meant to fight as like the whole team, where you're like commanding all your different people to do different things, and if you're missing a couple of those people and their abilities, then it makes things a little bit more challenging and a little bit more difficult, which is really I like that. I like that. Make your choices and deal with the consequences type of game.
The overall story is very good. I thought that what they really nailed was the sort of incidental dialogue, just the bickering.
Yes.
Like, I could listen to just that. Like, it was like if the whole game was just them sitting in a room talking to each other, it would be a fun movie.
And like, there is so much. I didn't hear it repeat once from all the playthrough that I watched and everything else. It was all unique. I can only imagine the hours in the booth that they were just recording. Just all of this different dialogue and everything. It's really they did a really good job. The writing on that is really fantastic. The next announcement that we have is best art direction went to Deathloop from Arcane as well. It also won best game direction and art direction, but the art direction I think fits it really well. It's such a fun game. To go around and just try and like avoid this other assassin trying to kill you, and then just finding new ways to kill different people that know that they're going to return on the next loop, so death is kind of inconsequential, is really, it's really fun.
I kind of remember the art direction from the trailers, because I remember when I first see the trailers, I feel like the game it's pretty fresh on its theme because of the visuals and other stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised that they win the best art direction. And I think, though I didn't play the game, but just looking at it, I think they deserve it.
Arcane has always really excelled in its art direction. I think that this was kind of a shoe-in. It was just such an easy choice for me. Like, they established this very clear sort of painterly style in Dishonored. And they just kept with that with Dishonored 2, with Prey.
Prey was really, I thought, was a fantastic. Just their style and the way they execute it is they pick a direction, and the entire world is.
Their games have a look.
Yeah.
And they stick very closely to that, and it's always like just a treat to look at their environments, at their models. Like, everything in that game is very well detailed and designed. So the art direction, absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like that's a very fantastic one. And the best score and music went to Nier Replicant, Keiichi Okabe. I wholeheartedly agree. The sound design and the music alone is, it's so beautiful and well conducted, and I was captured with Nier Automata. I didn't play the original Replicant, but it's so beautiful.
Square Enix has always been doing a very good job on their adaptive music and art design. Like, I remember when I heard it from a tech talk. They're actually using ray tracing for generating the environmental reverb for Nier Automata. So I feel like they
That's-
probably would have some amazing audio technologies in Near Replicant 2, but I haven't played the game, and I try to not to get myself spoiled, but probably I will play in the future and hopefully
Yeah,
to see what they do.
That's one of the few games where I will also just put on a soundtrack of and listen to it. There's so many other. I mean, there's like the orchestrated versions of like The Legend of Zelda and those performances, but in Nier, it's just in the game naturally. It's not like adapted, like digital music put in, made into a symphonic form. It's really, really amazing. I'm very happy that it won. I couldn't agree more with best score in music for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the second year in a row that Square Enix games win this award, if I remember right.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's very fair. And we have best action adventure game going to Metroid Dread. Miles, I think you did you also play it, Chun?
I don't,
Okay.
but I know Miles is a big fan.
Oh, yes.
So it was actually Metroid Dread, I think, absolutely deserves it, but it was up against some very stiff competition. It was against Guardians of the Galaxy. It was against the new Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It was against Resident Evil Village. It was against Psychonauts 2. So Metroid, like the action adventure category, is a weird one because it's combining like combat and fast paced action gameplay with much more exploration and puzzle solving and thinking about the environment and solving problems. I think Metroid Dread did that really well. Like Metroidvanias in general are typically very good at combining action adventure. But the through line you see with all of these nominees is kind of the same thing. Like Resident Evil Village was a very good action adventure game, but I don't think of it as an action adventure game. So it was interesting to see it in this category. Because that's really all Resident Evil is. It's running around and like getting attacked and sometimes fighting things, but really it's about solving puzzles.
Yeah, it's about solving puzzles, and I don't know, and like also just like the category, like action adventure is more of like a style of gameplay. Not, I believe, not necessarily like a story trope, because I mean, like there are horror games, there are breaking things into those categories. They're more of just like thematic, where I think action adventure is more kind of gameplay based, which is a broad category for a lot of things. I mean, as we saw in the lineup,
It would be great if they can just make the definitions more clear next year.
yes, like there are some categories that I think are like kind of overlapping and very in particular, but they fit. They all fit very like generally, but there's a lot of other ones.
I think what makes Metroid Dread win this category is its environmental design, its music, everything supports the feeling of exploration.
Okay.
Like Metroid has always been famous for having very atmospheric music, having very little in the way of direct themes and like music outside of like a boss fight or something. And this does that. Like Metroid Dread managed to take a side-scrolling game and have it compete against some very stiff competition with a lot more in the realm of like, oh, this is an action game. Like Resident Evil Village like looks fantastic, plays fantastically, sounds fantastic. Why does Metroid Dread win then? Because it's selling itself better. Like, it's not just because it's Metroid and we haven't had one in a long time. It's because it's a incredibly well-made game that does its one thing a lot better than Psychonauts 2 or Resident Evil Village or Ratchet and Clank, which does a lot of different things.
Yeah, Ratchet and Clank, it is an action adventure. I mean, it totally is an action adventure, but it has like platforming elements to it as well. I mean, it's another like almost kind of puzzle based game in a sense too. I think like the biggest thing I think about this Ratchet and Clank also is I think it was more of just like the first kind of like PS5 demo, or like to showcase what this console is capable of really in like in a new style. Which it's more like kind of like it's more of, I feel like, a pioneering next gen game that is really really amazing and showcases a lot of things, but it's also just like introducing the capabilities of a new generation. It's not quite as like refined as I think things will be later on as they have more time to work with this hardware. And I think like Metroid Dread also executed so well on the Switch. I think it was really fitting. I mean, it was also like you could play it handheld, but I think like actually playing it like on your TV, like turn the lights down and have it more be thematic really helps the ambiance of the game, where it's kind of like meant to be more ambient and not as so like in your face, like here, feel this with how it's going. We also have the most anticipated game being Elden Ring.
For the second year in a row.
This award is
second year in a row.
It's always like a knock from the dev. Let's hope it's not.
Yeah, I am not sure I really enjoy this as a category, because I feel like if it may also like push people to release things that aren't finished yet.
People are too hyped for it, and they're just.
I mean, yeah,
having
people
too
were
much
hyped for that.
Expectation for a game.
I mean, that's been happening for a long time now, and it's been coming to a pretty big head, I feel, with a lot of these games. I mean, Cyberpunk, No Man's Sky, but I mean, No Man's Sky, I believe, has kind of redeemed itself by adding all these like free updates and making it an actual good game now. But Cyberpunk still doesn't have like, I mean, it's now not broken, but it just the faults at launch were so like, it turns you off of a game when something doesn't work that egregiously. But I'm excited for Elden Ring. I like that you can have a mount that jumps, and it's the full world seems a lot more traversable and not like path oriented where you're limited by movement. I think a double jump is a good idea. I think jumping in general is a good idea for any Souls game. It would be really nice if you could jump. I get that you're carrying a 700-pound sword and 300 pounds of armor, but a jump would be nice.
I would be worried about that because I know the game is kind of open world, and what usually happens in open world games is people will complain about the lack of content, even though the world is so huge. And
that is what I've also heard about, like the demo and like people like checking like the early access
demo,
thing out.
So you can't say it's lack of content. Like there's no way to give you a whole game in a demo. I think people who are complaining about it on the demo is just nonsense. But for entire game, I feel like people is gonna complain about it. They're just having a realistic expectation on a lot of games these days.
I would agree to that. I mean, that was the same thing with, I mean, even Red Dead Redemption, there was like a lot of stuff to do, but it was a lot of open world. The big thing about that was like visually appealing and open world. People were like complaining about, I think that's going to be the same thing with Elden Ring, where like there's these open world aspects where it's a little empty, but it's meant to kind of like bring you into the game and like look around at your environment. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it could be a narrative based choice as well, that it would enhance the feeling of just being in the world, but it's also a balancing act where you have to make sure you're not it's a balancing act where you have to make sure you're not overusing it and only using it thematically at a story driven purpose, or like a point in the game where it needs to just like take a breather, look at your surroundings, gather your bearings. But I think those are all the announcements of the award winners that we have today. Now, I think it's time to talk about some announcements and reveals of things coming up. I know, Miles, you're excited about Alan Wake 2.
Yeah, it's been a while. The devs recently did Control, which a couple years ago I think won several game awards and definitely was praised very highly. And now they've gotten the chance to go back to another thing that's apparently in the same universe as Control. Alan Wake was, I think, a 360 game. It came out on PC, and I played it there. And it's a weird one. I like it because it's kind of horror, it's kind of Twin Peaks, it's kind of a bunch of things, and the trailer that we got seemed to lean very heavily into, like, things are a lot worse this time around. Like, if you don't know the story of Alan Wake, it's this writer who goes to some isolated town to, go on vacation, and finds out that his the horror stories he's been writing are coming to life. And
Ooh.
There's a bit more to it than that, but that's the general gist. So it's been a long time coming, and I'm excited to see what happens next. It's been an interesting story, and I'd like to see more.
That sounds really exciting. And we also were introduced to the Halo TV series trailer. It more like thematically and visually just showing what was going on. It looks really cool. Look visually really awesome and appealing. The CGI didn't look too terrible. No, it looked pretty good. I'm not going to like that. Too terrible sounds too harsh for it.
I reserve my opinion on any kind of TV series.
Yes. Well, it again looks nice. I mean, we saw what just happened to Cowboy Bebop, so we'll see how quickly this lasts or doesn't. Hopefully it does.
There were some things in the trailer that were very clearly CG. There were some things that looked almost kind of like in-game renders from like a very good like Unreal Engine or something. Like there was a scene in like the desert dungeon, I don't know, like one of the first shots of the trailer that looked kind of like it was from like it was done the way they did the sets on The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. It looked like an Unreal render.
Yeah.
Like a very good Unreal render, but I don't know, there was something about it, like the lighting or something, that made it seem rendered rather than practical.
But I do gotta say, they do have a practical Master Chief costume, which looks pretty rad. Mm-hmm. Definitely looks very real and intimidating.
I mean, Halo has something like 30 odd books to pull lore from, and 5-7 games, not including the spin-offs. 9 games maybe. But so there's so much world there that they can pull from. There's so much opportunity for them to tell like either a story that's already been told and like bring it to full like visualization. Yeah. There's opportunities for new stories. There's just so much content there that they can mine, and I think that they're going to have. I think it's going to be successful.
Yes, I mean, I also think that that's the same with another Telltale game that was announced, Star Trek Resurgence. I think that's like the same thing. There's so much. There's books. There's numerous shows. There's a lot of content that they can pull from. I also think it's nice to have a Star Trek game where it puts you in the shoes of a Starfleet member, making choices that allow you to kind of direct your own Star Trek universe. I'm also very excited for that. So we'll see. Allowing you to choose your way through all these games, but the Halo TV series, hopefully they will be very good. Fingers crossed. Don't have your hopes too high, like anything else. We have a new horror game from the Silent Hill creators, Slitterhead. I remember playing a bit of Silent Hill, but horror games are not usually my standpoint. Not my preferred gameplay mode. I don't like the jump scares.
It's never just about a jump scare in Silent Hill. I mean,
it's never just about it. No.
Yeah, the atmosphere in Silent Hill is what makes it a very good horror game, and the music too.
Yeah, the music is very tense.
For this game, they're making, I feel like the art direction really gets my eyeballs, just because it's on a very Hong Kong-like environment for the whole film, but it's a little bit weird to me because they're using some music that doesn't sound like should be appears in a horror game in the trailer, but we'll see. It's probably a very early concept trailer, so we'll wait and see what they get for us.
I mean, what got me about it was the monster design, which just looked insane. Like I was all the monsters that they showed off looked so cool.
Yeah, very horrifying, very brutal. The monster design does look really insane. But as far as like the heavy metal goes, I think it'll be interesting to see, because I think it may just be like a thematic at the start and then used as like build up for tense moments. I don't know. We'll see. It's another game worth looking out for.
I mean, what I thought was so good about Silent Hill, and I think why it's so well received and memorable to this day, is it's not just about scaring you, it's about being atmospheric and making you like dread playing it. Like the atmosphere of Silent Hill, like the town itself is scary in a way that isn't like actively jumping out at you. It's not like Silent Hill isn't about the monsters. Like the monster design is very good and that's the point, but the game itself is about being unsettling.
I never forget how those mists scare me off. Just
So I hope that they lean into that and remember that atmosphere is just as important as a spooky monster.
I think they will. I have faith. We also have a new Lord of the Rings game, Gollum, which looked really interesting. Like it feels like it's going to be a more narrative. Well, they said it was going to be a more narrative based. It looked, from the early things that we've seen, it looks a bit like a platform based and then choice based. Whether you're going to like give in to Gollum or stay as Schmeagol. I think I'm excited to check it out and see what story that they tell. I know it's not the same the same developers that did Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, which were other fantastic games set in the universe with its own story. But I think I'm excited to see this. I always love games that are set in the Lord of the Rings world that add to the universe and build some more.
Absolutely. We saw a very brief, like from what I saw of the Gollum trailer, there wasn't a whole lot of gameplay to latch onto or to speculate about.
No,
there's a little more on its Steam page, which is already up.
Yes, yeah, the Steam page
that we looked over. And I'm going to wildly speculate for a second.
Yes,
that it's going to be kind of a stealth game.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it is going to be sort of in the vein of... No one's played this game, so...
Yes.
No, I mean the game that I'm about to talk about. No
Oh.
one has played Styx.
No.
Styx, I think Shards of Darkness and Styx. There were 2 Styx games. One of them was co-op, one of them wasn't. And in Styx, you play as a goblin who, on the harder difficulties, is just one hit killed. Like, so it's very much a, like, you have to balance being stealthy because you're very fragile with doing a bunch of objectives and, you know, collecting loot and all that sort of stuff and navigating these, like, jumping puzzle maze-like areas. Based on absolutely nothing, I'm going to say that Lord of the Rings Gollum, The Untold Story, is going to be kind of like Styx. Just because Gollum very much reminds me of that kind of character.
Yes, he is very fragile. You can't have a lot of direct, like, fighting interactions with him. It has to be a lot more, like, stealth-based and hidden. I mean, he's a very stealthy character. He likes caves.
I mean, we saw traps, we saw jumping puzzles, we saw, like, hanging off of things. Those are all things that Styx does. Like, Styx is a very trap-heavy game because you're not capable of taking people on in a fair fight.
I like that approach to things too. Making as a person who likes that, like, if you're given a choice to build a character, I build a character that like a tank that can just deal a lot, like take a lot and deal a lot of damage. So I like games that kind of force you to kind of rethink that and play differently. Changes my thinking and the way about the way I go about everything too. I'm still really excited for it. I think that may be all the time we have for talking about new announcements and new games. There are many more. We may bring a couple of these back in the new year. But before we go, what have you been playing currently? So we can give people some recommendations for the holiday break.
You know the game.
Oh, yeah. You're playing... what's it called? You're playing that new Ratchet and Clank, right?
Oh, that's funny.
Yes. Final Fantasy XIV, it did win Best Ongoing Game this year as well. So it's definitely worth checking out. I mean, it did win more than that, but Ongoing Game,
Best community.
go check it out.
Best community. They deserve every single bit of it.
I would have to agree with that as well. I've still been playing Horizon Zero Dawn in preparation for Forbidden West coming out, and man, it is a great game. The story direction, the world building involved, the map is huge and diverse and beautiful, and the level, and it's very difficult too. At points, there's so many options where you can approach many different fights. It's really, really cool. Highly recommend checking it out. You can get the complete edition on Steam, console, whatever you're playing. Check it out.
Have I mentioned Barotrauma?
I believe last week a little bit, but talk a little bit more about it.
So I am still playing Barotrauma, which is this alien underwater submarine simulator that you play with your friends. Everyone gets a task or a sort of role aboard the ship. So I'm the medical officer. My friend is the captain, the security officer, the engineer, the mechanic, that sort of thing. You go around and do missions, and things go wrong very quickly. You're attacked by aliens. You spring leaks. A clown appears in your ship, and you have to run away from it because it has a honking horn, and that's terrifying.
Oh no.
It's a lot of just goofing around because the
underwater sea clowns sound terrifying.
Underwater sea clowns. No, it's just a clown costume and somebody dresses up in it, and then we pretend to be scared of them because it's very funny.
Okay.
So no, the game is very good. It's difficult. Like, it is hard to complete your objectives without at least somebody dying, because the ocean on an alien planet is a dangerous place. But it's a lot of fun.
Ocean.
If you've got a couple friends, I recommend it. Maybe wait for it to be on sale. I think it's a bit expensive right now, but it is definitely worth looking at.
Alrighty. So that's all we have. We're going to be going on break for 2 weeks. We will be back in the new year. Everyone have a very happy holiday and a happy new year. We want to thank you for listening to the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment's official podcast. If you have any thoughts, questions, corrections, or general museum ideas, please shoot us an email at info@themade.org.
We'd like to send out a big thank you to everyone who donated recently and to our Patreon supporters who keep the Made afloat. Patreon donors get to listen to this podcast 1 week before it's released on major streaming services, and we'll continue that with future episodes every week.
This week's episode was brought to you in part by Patreon donors Daniel James and Will Thomas. Thank you so much for your support. Till next time, I'm Miles.
I'm Chun.
And I'm Red. Thanks, and we will see you in the new year.
Happy New Year.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, gamers!